All right, welcome to Pro Football First 50 Years, where we take the past and we bring it back to life. Now, I'm strictly talking the first 50 years here, 1920 to 1970. And especially if you're going to go back in time and check out a game from the 1920s or the 30s. I mean, sure, you can go online and find the box score, who won, who lost, who scored a touchdown, how far a field goal was that someone kicked, what the attendance was, where the game was played at. You might find starting lineups for each team, but exactly what happened during the game? Well, thanks to old newspaper articles, we get to take a little bit of a deeper dive into each and every game during the first 50 years of professional football. Now, a little news flash here for you. Ain't no fancy videos or nothing like that. All there is you and me for the next 30 to 60 minutes. So if that's all right with you, let's get it on in today's game. Whew, some bad blood boiling on this one, baby. Whew, Bobby Lane. Bobby Lane is in my ear. Da, 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 da. The Detroit Lions. Oh, Bobby Lane jinxed them good. 1957 and count. He said they wouldn't win for 50 years. Well, it's been almost 70, and they still haven't won. Detroit Lions at the Pittsburgh Steelers at Forbes Field, November 8th, 1959. Now, Detroit traded Bobby Lane, 1958, from the Lions to the Steelers. Bobby was not happy. So anytime Bobby went up again, well, Bobby didn't want to lose to anybody, but he didn't want to lose to the Detroit Lions. Whew. And of course, the Lions, didn't want to lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers because Bobby Lane was there. Well, neither team won. It wound up a tie. So, more about that in just a little bit. Both these teams started off relatively slow. One team would continue to have a horrible season. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers would start slow, but they finished very well, very, very well. The last 6 games or so, I believe they were. We'll look at it, and it was just. I think they were 4-1-1. This would be the one tie that they had, but. The Lions just a very disappointing season. They had some injuries, but one of their biggest problems was their passing game. I mean, some games they just couldn't block anybody. The week before this, they gave up it didn't say how many times their quarterbacks got sacked, but they lost 75 yards in sacks to the 49ers. They got blown out. They lost one of it. They lost. They gave up a safety. They got sacked for a 20-yard loss on one play, and they got sacked into the end zone. But besides that, they lost an additional 55 yards in sack yardage during the game. And this is back in the day when it was pretty much a running league, So I mean, Tobin wrote. Throwing a lot of interceptions. Sometimes his passes were not good at all. They said the blocking was not very good. They did not have very good wide receivers. The wide receivers often were in the newspapers were mentioned as far as dropping passes. They were just not a very good team. And throughout the whole season, let's pop their schedule up here. I mean, they won 3 games and they had this one tie. But their 3 wins were against bad football teams, as we'll see. I mean, they had a nice preseason, as we'll see here. And then, for crying out loud, they played 7 preseason games, 12 regular season games, 7 exhibition games, for a total of 19 games. And you see right here. They won. This is wrong. I don't know. I don't even know if Pro Football Archives even cares about this. But this is wrong. The Cardinals won this game 21-19. Here it has that the Lions won this game 21-19. That's wrong. But even still, I mean the Lions won 4 games. They were 4-2-1 in preseason. That was just preseason. Once the regular season started, you can see they started off 0-4. And pretty much almost after the first 4 weeks, they were out of almost any contention as far as winning the divisional title. I mean, they would have had to run the final 8 games and hope and pray that somebody else, would have, other teams would have collapsed ahead of them, and that didn't happen. So when they finally did win a game, they were outplayed by the Rams, but the Rams lost because of mistakes and due to this game here. But the Lions beat the Rams, who won only 2 games all year. Then their next victory was against the Rams, who won only 2 games all year. Then they finally beat the Cardinals, who won only 2 games all year. So when they were beating teams, the teams they were beating were not very good. Meanwhile, the Steelers started off very poorly. Things were not looking good at all. I mean, if you go from here, you take this tie that we're going to talk about here, this 10-10 tie, and you go all the way through to even their preseason, they only had 4 wins. So let's see, how many games are you going back? So you took the tie 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the first 13 games, including preseason now, 13 games, they only had 4 wins. So, it was not a very good exhibition. It was not a very good start to the regular season. But to the Steelers' credit, they really turned things around at the end. They actually wound up with a 6-5-1 record. Buddy Parker's a very good coach. Very, very good coach. And you see here, right, they had the tie to the Lions. Then they beat the Giants. Bobby Lane. It was like with about a minute and a half to go in the game. The Giants were winning this game 9-7. And Bobby Lane threw a touchdown pass in like about a minute and a half or so to go at Yankee Stadium to upset the Giants. Then they beat the Browns. Then they just annihilated the Eagles. Then they lost a tough one to the Bears, who actually on the road. And the Bears I think, rattled off like won their final 7 games. The Bears were 8-4, so the Bears were a very good team at 59. So to lose this one 27-21 on the road to the Bears is almost no shame in that. Then the final game of the season, they whooped up on the Cardinals. But you can see right here, the final 6 games, they won 4, lost 1, and tied 1. And they actually rebounded and had a 6-5-1 record. Now, of course, for both these teams, playoffs. Playoffs, that's nothing. Nothing here, obviously, in 59. And to get going through all 60s, nothing. Nothing at all. No championship games or none of that. That wouldn't be until 1972, obviously, with the Steelers. And then it took to 1970. Joe Schmidt was the coach at the time for the Lions. They finally made it back to the playoffs. They lost, as I keep saying, one of my favorite playoff games of all times. They lost 5-0 to the Dallas Cowboys at the Cotton Bowl. But so this, it was not the best of times, basically, for either team, and for obviously we know once the 70s got around, we know what the Steelers did. That was the decade of the Steelers, no question about that. But getting back to Bobby Lane, now he'd hurt himself late in 57. I think it was like his ankle. He got caught in like a pileup, and so he was injured for the final few games of the season. Tobin Rote took over. Tobin Rote won. There was a playoff game between the 49ers and the Lions. Both teams had identical records at the end of the season, so they had a playoff game. The 49ers were win 27-7 at Kezar Stadium. The Lions came roaring back, and won 31-27. And Tobin Rote took the Lions to the championship game at Briggs Stadium, where they would wind up annihilating the Browns 59-14. So Tobin Rote was kind of like the hero. Very early on in 1958, Bobby Lane was still the quarterback for the Lions, but he wasn't doing very well. and they traded him because he was getting up there in age, and they figured Tobin Rote took him to a championship, so they figured Tobin Rote can do it again. So they traded Bobby Lane to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So there was, and kind of as the story kind of goes, Bobby said that the Lions wouldn't win for 50 years, and so that would have been in 2007 would have been their final. Would have been the 50 years. Well, in 2008, the Lions actually went winless. They went 0-16. So we're still waiting. It's 1957. So you figure, from 58, to this season here, I guess it would be like 57 would be like 69 years, including the. So if the Lions will win the Super Bowl this year, it would be 69 years since they. So the Lions are a long dry spout. But anyway, this game is played at good old Forbes Field. Let's see what does Wikipedia have to say about Forbes Field here. It's one of those old-time classic stadiums. Forbes Field, Wikipedia. All right. Forbes Field was a baseball park in the Oakland neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, from 1909 to 1970. It was the third home of the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team. From 1909 to 1924, the stadium also served as the home field of the University of Pittsburgh, the Pitt Panthers. The stadium sat on Forbes Avenue, named for British General John Forbes, who fought in the French and Indian War and named the city in 1758. So, I mean, usually it's kind of odd, to name a stadium or a street and all of that stuff after a British general. But let's see. U.S. We got $1 million or $35.8 million today. Project was launched by Pittsburgh Pirates owner Barney Dreyfuss to replace his franchise's second home, Exposition Park. The stadium was made of concrete and steel, the first such stadium in the National League and the third in Major League Baseball, in a bid to be more durable than wooden ballparks. Oh, yeah. Yeah, obviously the wooden ballparks aren't as durable, and of course they're also a huge fire hazard. Let's see here. Some remnants of the ballpark still stands. Surrounded by the campus of the University of Pittsburgh, fans gather on the site annually on the anniversary of Bill Mazeroski's World Series winning home run, in what author Jim O'Brien writes is one of the most unique expressions of love of the game to be found in a major league city. As you can see here, I mean, it's just, oddly, once again, shaped stadium. Planning and design, 1903, Pittsburgh Pirates owner Barney Dreyfuss began to look for ground to build a larger capacity replacement for the team's then current home, Exposition Park. Dreyfuss purchased 7 acres of land near the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, adjacent to Shenley Park, with the assistance from his friend, industrialist Andrew Carnegie. The low-priced land was selected so Dreyfuss could spend more on the stadium itself. Well, because Andrew Carnegie was the one, he was the steel man, so I'm sure he supplied all the steel for the stadium. So if you're going to have a friend and you want a stadium built, and you were friends with Andrew Carnegie, not that he gave you the steel for nothing, but I'm sure he saved you some money, maybe. But anyway, Dreyfuss signed a contract to make the ballpark of a design that would harmonize with the other structures in the district. Opening. First game was played at Forbes Field on June 30th, 1909, one day after the Pittsburgh Pirates had defeated the Chicago Cubs 8-1 at Exposition Park. So basically, one game was played at Exposition Park. The next day, the game, their next baseball game was played at Forbes Field. How cool! Get this over here. Forbes Field outfield wall and flagpole when it's in its original location in Oakland. How cool is that? They still have it there, which is cool. I really, that I appreciate. You have a ballpark like this. That, you figure that there wasn't. We're not talking football championships there, but I mean just the players who played there. And then you go obviously to Forbes Field with the Pirates. Bill Mazeroski's home run in the 1960 World Series game. I think Yogi Berra was the one looking up at left field as the ball sailed over the fence. Here we got this right here. A recreated entrance, including ticket window located near the remaining outfield wall. Oh, that's cool, too. It's not the original one, but it's a recreation. And you got home plate of Forbes Field located in the Posver Hall at the University of Pittsburgh. Fantastic. It's, in this too, right? The left field wall was moved to PNC Park in 2009. Look at that, huh? Forbes Field Monument, Pittsburgh, PA. So, so obviously, if you can't keep the whole stadium, just if you can keep little tidbits of it, Forbes Field in its early years. Let's see, here we go. Football. There's a Pittsburgh Panther game against the Washington Jefferson in 1915. Now, to be honest, Washington Jefferson was a very good football team. Bob Folwell coached that team for 4 or 5 years, I believe it was, or so, and he was the first head coach in the New York Giants history in 1925. But when Bob Folwell was the head coach of Washington Jefferson, they were a very good team. So, you look at the Pittsburgh, Washington, it's like who'd know? Well, they had some good teams. There was obviously a lot of teams back then who had good teams, and some of them that colleges aren't even like around anymore, or maybe the colleges might be around, but they don't have football anymore. But you can see, look, the place looked packed. All right, so let's see. Football. University of Pittsburgh football team moved from Exposition Park into Forbes Field upon its opening in 1909 and played there until 1924, when it moved into the larger Pitt Stadium only a few blocks away. In their first game at Forbes Field on October 16, 1909, they defeated Bucknell 18-6. 1910, Pitt's second year at Forbes Field, they went undefeated without allowing a single point. The Panthers had several successful seasons while playing at Forbes Field, including 5 in which they went undefeated and were awarded national championship titles in 10, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Wow. During the years at Forbes Field, Pitt's team was led by Hall of Fame coaches Joe Thompson, Glenn Pop Warner, and Jock Sutherland. 1926 Carnegie Tech Tartans football team pulled off one of the greatest upsets in sports history by defeating the 8-0 Notre Dame Fighting Irish, shutting them out 19-0. Legendary Notre Dame head coach Newt Rockne thought the Pittsburgh team would be easily defeated and did not show up for the game. Let's see. Art Rooney founded the NFL team under the name the Pittsburgh Pirates on July 8, 1933 for $2,500. Franchise's first game against the Giants was held on September 20, 1933 at Forbes Field. The Giants won the game 23-2 in front of 25,000 people. Rooney wrote of the game, the Giants won. Our team looks terrible. The fans didn't get their money's worth. The Pirates rebounded to gain their first ever franchise win a week later at Forbes Field against the Cardinals. Then, of course, in 1940, the Pirates were renamed the Steelers and otherwise struggled during much of their 3 decades of tenancy at the Forbes Field. Now, they did have 1947 at the end of the season. The Steelers and the Eagles record was identical. So they had a playoff game, unfortunately, for them. I think it was. I know the Eagles won. The Eagles won. It was 21-0 or 28-0 or so. So the Pirates were actually involved in a playoff game. That was to see who would go to the championship game. And it didn't matter anyway because the Cardinals wound up beating the Eagles 28-21 in the championship game. But that was the only, from 1933 to 1971, that was really like the only playoff game that they had in their history. Let's see. The NFL's Pirates were renamed the Steelers, blah, 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 blah. The club achieved its first winning record in 1942. It took them 10 seasons. Oh, yeah, they blew out the Giants on November 30th, 1952. Snowy afternoon. Pittsburgh entered the game with a 3-6 record, but went on to set multiple team records, including scoring 9 touchdowns, and they won 63-7. The University of Pittsburgh acquisition of Forbes Field in 1958 gave the Steelers some options, and they began transferring some of their home games to the much larger Pitt Stadium that year. Steelers played their final game at Forbes Field on December 1st, 1963. The franchise moved to Pitt Stadium exclusively the following season until 1969. And in 1970, right, that's when their new stadium opened up. And actually, their new stadium, Three Rivers Stadium, was at the first. Actually, you can find it on YouTube. Was the Pittsburgh Steelers hosted the New York Giants. It was Terry Bradshaw's first. It was the exhibition game, the first ever game, and I think the Steelers won like 20-6. Frank Tarkin, I think, was injured in that game, or he didn't play in that game, which probably would have helped the Giants. But that's on YouTube, so you could find the first ever game, Terry Bradshaw's first. It was exhibition, but for Three Rivers, Terry Bradshaw, first ever game, 1970. So. They played at Pitt Stadium until 1969. So, and it was as I said here, there was a ton of other things, boxing events and all kinds of other things. But I got some pictures here. Let's see. Let's do this real fast here. Just got some few pictures here because I got a decent amount of coverage on this one game here, Forbes Field. Here we go. Right. Here we go. Now, it's just the way it is. Was opening day. Yeah, opening day, 1949. Just 20,957 on hand between the Giants and the Steelers. Now, obviously, the Giants are in the red, the Steelers are over here. But just the way the ballpark was. Now, this is the wall where Bill Mazeroski hit his home run over. Right, and Yogi Berra, I think it was Yogi Berra ran here. And he looked up, and the ball went over, sailing over the scoreboard and everything. But just the way the ballpark was at the time was laid out. And I'll show you another picture here. You know, kind of shows you how it looks. It's like you're like, where the people at? Where? I mean, you can see a little bit of the grandstand or whatever over here. You know, some stands, but over here is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Where are we at here? There we go. Here we go. It just goes to show you. I mean, like over here. See that was what the thing in the bottom corner there, what I was showing you. This right over here is this right here. But other than that, you see that there's nothing out here. There's no. Now you can see here, right? Obviously, because it looks like there's a street here. See, there's cars here, kind of lines. There's like a street over here. So. But it's just kind of, I don't know, maybe over here they couldn't have put nothing. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. But you see all the people were like here from like, you know, the third baseline and all the way over here. And, but see, a lot of it also has to do with, the way the streets are laid out. You can't build a stadium that goes across a street or whatever. So, I mean, sometimes you're at the mercy. And here we go. Here's the, right. Here's you can see the stands there, right? But back here, there's nothing. And you look over here, right? The baseball, right? Right here. And back here is just, trees and, beautiful, beautiful ballpark. But that's just the way it was laid out. And you look over here, right? For all I know, that could be Bill Mazeroski right there. I think he might be him, number 9. I don't know. I'm not sure, but this is where it hit the home run at. And once again, you look out here, it's like, where are the people at? Let's see, that was the football. Is this, yeah, Forbes Field right here. But see, you can see, it depends upon which way you're looking at it and all. And now you can see nothing but people. Yeah, so it's a bit odd. Bit odd. What the heck this is here? In the football database. But, I mean, there was obviously a lot of players, fantastic players who played there. Not so much fantastic games. And the same thing as Steelers versus the Redskins in the early 50s. Once again, you look in here, it's like, where are the people at here? But you're looking out into the left field out here where the scoreboard's out there, and there's no people. So all the people are all behind this picture here. And this is Forbes Field. Right after, it was going to get torn down or whatever, and so they just kind of let it go. I don't know, right? Shame, but one of those, old time stadiums. At least they, obviously they couldn't keep it. But there are remnants of the stadium. So anyway, one thing I want to show you is that the Detroit Lions would be without the services of one of the running backs, John Henry Johnson. Let me show you for the. Let's see here for this game here. He got himself into a little bit of trouble. As we shall see. All right, share the screen. Where are we at here? Here we go. All right. Lions suspend Johnson, faces arrest on the coast. Now, the week before, Detroit was in San Francisco playing the 49ers where they got blown out. But John Henry Johnson, let me make this a little bit bigger if we can. Can I make this bigger with my fingers? Yeah. Let's see here. See if we can get 300. That's 300. Look. No. We'll try. Let's try. John Henry Johnson, erratic Lions fullback, was suspended indefinitely today by Coach George Wilson. Now, this article was from, I believe it was from Monday. So they played. So I believe this article was from the 2nd. I believe it was from November 2nd. So he was suspended, and he wasn't playing in this game. So he suspended indefinitely today by Coach George Wilson for missing the plane back to Detroit after the 49er game in San Francisco. Almost simultaneously, an Oakland, California judge issued a warrant for Johnson's arrest for contempt of court. He was supposed to be in court. Didn't show up. That's a no. The big fullback failed to appear in court today on charges he had given his divorced wife and 5 children's no-back alimony since last January. Johnson was served and a summons to appear in court in the dressing room immediately after the rout by the 49ers. So as in the dressing room, he was issued, or shall I say, he was served the summons to appear in court. Until his non-appearance in court, some thought he had stayed over as the summons ordered. In another odd twist, Lion President Edwin J. Anderson told Wilson today from the San Francisco airport that he had just encountered Johnson there and assumed he was taking the next plane back to Detroit. Anderson also is heading home here. Johnson will not play against Pittsburgh next week, Wilson said flatly. The suspension, if only for a week, will cost the big fullback about $1,350 a week's pay. And interestingly, that's about how much he owes his wife. So, I mean, Is what it is. At approximately $16,000 a year, Johnson is second only to quarterback Tobin Rote as the highest paid Lion. Furthermore, he will have to pay his own way back from the coast, said Wilson. There are two reasons for his suspension, said the coach. First, he missed the plane, and I'm very strict on that. Secondly, he will be missing this afternoon's practice here. It was the first suspension by Wilson since he became head coach 2 years ago, and he said the first time in his tenure a player has missed a plane. Wilson said he acted after conferring by phone with Anderson in the San Francisco airport. Johnson is liable to immediate arrest as soon as he is spotted in California. Extradition proceedings are unlikely against him, however. Since his divorce a year ago, Johnson has lived in a basement apartment at LaSalle, 13600 LaSalle. There was no one home today, and his 1959 Cadillac hardtop was gone from its usual place behind the building. So he has a brand new Cadillac in 1959, and he can't pay his wife how much money he has. All those kids and not paying them. So. Johnson disappeared after being served the summons in the dressing room. So he was served the summons and he just disappeared. A call for him to appear before the judge at 9:15 a.m., I guess on Monday, and show cause why he was not in contempt of court for ignoring his attorney payments. Johnson's ex-wife, Barbara, who's 26, told the judge today after his non-appearance that she had been paid no money since last January and that he now owes $2,360 in arrears. So, I mean, he's getting suspended for a week's pay, which is $1,300 or whatever. He owes $2,300, and he has himself a brand new Cadillac, and he can't pay $20. I mean, so basically he owes him like for a year, or he owes like $200 a month. He's making $1,400 a game, whatever it is. I mean, you can't. Anyway, Johnson's children are 4 girls and a boy. He has 5 kids, and he's not paying child support. So unbelievable. But so he will not be. He will he will not be playing in the game today. So I don't even know if they even know where he's at as of November 8th, but. He got handed the summons to appear in court, and he just disappeared. All right, so let's see. What do we got? We got some, let's go to the Jackson Citizen Patriot. Oh, all right. November 8th, 1959. What do they got to say? All right. And there it is. Grudge match. Luster worn by poor records. But I mean, actually going into the game, both teams had bad records. But the Steelers will really turn things around their final 6 games or so this season. Pittsburgh, the Lions and the Steelers square off today in a grudge battle that has much of the gloss worn off by the defeats. The Lions, with 1 victory in 6 games, are last in the Western Division. The Steelers, with 2 victories and 4 defeats, share the Eastern Division basement with Washington and the Cardinals. Both teams are hopelessly out of title contention, yet there is keen interest in the game. It'll pit the coaching of George Wilson and Buddy Parker for the first time in regular NFL play. Bobby Lane will be playing against the ex-Lion teammates he helped to 3 world championships before going to Pittsburgh. Lane will be matched against Tobin Rote, the quarterback who ousted him from Detroit. This is the Lions' first meeting with the Steelers since 1956 when Detroit won 45-7. Parker was Detroit's coach then, and Wilson was one of his assistants. Parker walked out on the Lions just before the 57 season. I can't handle this team any longer, he told a stunned audience at the annual preseason Lions banquet. I quit. Wow. Wilson was named his successor, and the next day the Lions went out and won another world championship with a spectacular late-season drive. That was in 1957, and they've won only 5 games since, losing 12. Parker went to Pittsburgh and had moderate success. Steelers won their last 6 games in 1958 after Lane was acquired in the celebrated trade that sent Earl Morrall to Detroit. But the Steelers have slumped this year, and so has Lane. The Wilson-Parker feud, Wilson says there isn't any, has cooled off lately. Once in 57, Parker and Wilson had a hot verbal dispute in the Vespers Club in Philadelphia. The only resumption of the feud came 2 weeks ago. It involved tackle Jim Weatherall, a player the Steelers wanted and the Lions got. Both clubs claimed Weatherall on waivers, and the Lions had prior rights because they were lower in the standings. Parker accused Detroit of stealing Weatherall. Wilson refused to be drawn into a controversy. The Lions will go into the game in fair physical condition following their crushing defeat last week at San Francisco. Rote recovered from a fractured thumb and will replace Morrall as starting quarterback. Fullback John Henry Johnson, suspended by Wilson for missing a plain and indifferent play, will miss the game. He was left in Detroit, and Kenny Webb will continue as Detroit's starting fullback. So I guess he finally did make his way back to Detroit during the week. The Steelers are favored by 6.5 points. The game will be televised in Michigan on CBS at 2 p.m. Wilson has revamped his team for the game, switching defense halfback Terry Barr to offense for the first time in his NFL career. The ex-Michigan star will be employed as a pass receiver in Hopalong Cassidy's old slot back post. Cassidy's moves into a running back position. Dick LeBeau, formerly of Ohio State, was added to the roster Saturday and will be used as a defensive safety. Yale Larry, who had been playing safety, will move up to Barr's vacated position. So, I mean, the Lions had 4 Hall of Famers. They had Dick LeBeau, Yale Larry, Joe Schmidt, and Alex Garrison on their defense. Yeah, so Yale Larry, Steve Junker was placed on the injured reserve list, making room for LeBeau. The move of Barr was expected, an outstanding defensive player. His first 2 seasons in the NFL, Barr has been unsteady this year. Let's see what we got over here. All right. Okay. Then we got, what do we got here? The Grand Rapids Press. All right, it's got to be a Michigan paper. So we'll go to the November 8th, 1959 edition of the Grand Rapids Press. What we got here? All right, here we go. Lions switch Terry Barr to offense. There's Buddy Parker and George Wilson. Oh, looks like I have to refresh the page here. All right. Coach George Wilson has switched defensive halfback Terry Barr to Hopalong Cassidy's offensive slot back position for Sunday's clash with the Steelers. With the 24-year-old Barr, former Grand Rapids Central High School and University of Michigan star, playing offense for the first time in his National Football League career, Cassidy has been moved to the running back position. I guess probably because John Henry Johnson won't be there. Dick LeBeau, formerly of Ohio State, was added to the Lions roster Saturday and will start at right defensive safety. All right, the move of Barr was expected. An outstanding defensive player in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. Barr has been unsteady and guilty of letting several receivers get behind him for touchdown passes. Barr set an East-West Shrine Game record by catching 9 passes in the 57 charity game. Sunday's game doesn't mean anything in the National Football League title picture, but the way the Lions and Steelers are pointing towards the battle, you'd think they're fighting for the championship. The Lions, with 1 victory in 6 games, are last in the West. Both teams are hopelessly out of contention. Let's see here. This is all pretty much all the same thing that was said before. And like in that other article. Let me see. We got one more here. We got November 8th, 1959 of the Pittsburgh Press. Let's see what they got to say. Then we'll start actually talking about the game. Imagine that. November 8th, 1959, the Pittsburgh Press. Detroit sends 3,000 rooters to the Steeler tilt. Lions rated 6-point underdogs, but Parker feels that's wrong. A growling, refresh the page once again. A growling band of Detroit Lions, their claws sharpened for an all-out performance before the man who once coached them will meet the Steelers at Forbes Field today at 2 p.m. So there was also that too. You know what I mean? Their former coach who walked out on them, right? So even though the game means little in the National Football, a crowd of about 30,000, swollen considerably by pilgrimage of about 3,000 people from Detroit, will sit in on the battle. Lions winners have only one of 5 games this year. Rule is a 6-point underdogs. But Buddy Parker, who coached the Lions to 3 National Football League titles before and suddenly quitting 3 years ago, feels the price is far out of line. As far as Parker is considered, Detroit isn't an underdog to anybody. At the risk of igniting another flare-up in his sporadic feud with George Wilson, a former assistant and his successor with the Lions, Parker uses nothing but superlatives in describing the visitors from the NFL Western Division. He makes no secret of the fact that he regards Joe Schmidt, the Lions' great linebacker, Darius McCord, Harlan Sewell, a guard who may not play today, Dave Middleton, Gil Maines, halfbacks, Jem David, Larry among the finest operatives in football. Parker is as surprised as everybody else in Detroit's slow start this year, yet he regards it more as one of those when the breaks are not falling Lions' way than any deterioration of the football team. That's a ball club that can explode at any time, explains Parker. Meanwhile, Parker is facing the same problem with the Steelers that Wilson faces with the Lions. So far, the Rooney Men, a team that has certainly had more potential than it's shown on occasion this season, have been equally as, now here's the, there's the offensive lineups, there's the list of players. And you notice there's only 36 players on the team. That's all there is, unlike today where there's 46. So each guy on that roster is extremely important. All right, let's see here. Wait, hold on. Where I go? Rooney Men, a team that certainly has more potential than is shown on an occasion this season, have been equally as disappointing as the Lions. The big question posed by the Steelers is this: how can a team so clearly superior in its games with the Browns and the Giants tail off so poorly against the Eagles, the Redskins, and the Cardinals? Part of the answer may be forthcoming today. Yeah, I mean, they got blown out by the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals, were a bad team, but they lost to Washington, who's a bad team, but it is what it is. But, as I said, the Steelers really did a good job. The final 6 games of the season, they won 4 games, lost 1, and tied 1. So, all right, so let's go to the Pittsburgh Press, November 9th, 1959 edition of the Pittsburgh Press. All right. Here we go. Try it again. Steelers dissatisfied with tie. 10-10 not with Lions is disappointing. Steelers Don Sutherland 20 tries for flying tackle as the Lions hop along Cassidy. That's a flying tackle right there. Let me tell you what. 7 weeks ago, the Steelers encouragingly opened the football campaign with a 17-7 victory over the Browns. The win, which ran the Steelers' streak to 8 in a row, heartened Pittsburgh football fans to no end. But somewhere between then and now, Coach Buddy Parker's Chargers lost the formula for victory. Week by week, the team got progressively worse. The winning formula escaped them again yesterday, although the Rooney men, hopelessly outplayed for three quarters, managed to salvage a 10-10 tie against the Lions. The tie proved to be of little solace to owner Art Rooney, to Parker, or to any players themselves. Yesterday's game was a disheartening performance against a Detroit team, which had turned out to be every bit as disappointing as the Steelers themselves. What we got here? We got grabbing a pass from Bobby Lane, the Steelers' Pete Brewster, number 88, who apparent completion was broken up by line defender in the third quarter. Aha. Let's see. It's only because Detroit's field goal kickers tackled Jerry Perry and veteran Jim Martin were unable to cash in on three easy attempts that the Steelers were in the game at all. Perry missed on boosts of 19 and 27 yards. Martin, who kicked a 17-yarder to assure Detroit of its deadlock, had one block from the 17-yard line, and he missed a desperation 57-yard attempt on the final play of the game. Otherwise, the football game was a disappointing and frustrating experience for the Lions and Steelers alike. Steeler quarterback Bobby Lane experienced probably his worst day as a Steeler, particularly in the first half when he was trapped for 52 yards while trying to pass. In the second half, he did better, but it was obvious that this was not one of Lane's better days. Unlike other games when enemy defenses out-stunted the Steelers' pass protection, it was nothing but straight-ahead charging that gave the Steeler quarterback his unhappy moments yesterday. The Steelers were unable to stop ends Darius McLeod, and tackle Gil Maines, who applied the pressure. Parker, after the game, rapped the team's failure to protect Lane, pointing out that poor blocking was responsible for the breakdown in the line. When the Steelers finally scored, it was on the arm of Lane, the veteran quarterback who nailed Ray Matthews, Darrell Brewster, Larry Krutko, and Tom Tracy during a march that covered 75 yards in 5 plays. The tying touchdown, which came on a 20-yard toss from Lane to Tracy, was the highlight of the drive, coming as it did only one play after Lane had hit Krutko with a 27-yard flare pass to the Detroit 20. Touchdown came with only 3:25 to go and created a 10-10 deadlock. Meanwhile, the Lions had built up a 7-0 lead in the opening minutes of the game when quarterback Tobin Rote, who injured his knee late in the second quarter, he's been banged up all year long, sneaked over from the 1. It came after some great running by halfbacks Terry Barr and Hopalong Cassidy moved the ball 73 yards in 5 decisive plays after the opening kickoff. Detroit's 7-0 margin stood up the rest of the half. Steelers made it 7-3 in the third quarter on a 29-yard field goal by Lane, his 10th in 11 attempts this year, but lost that advantage shortly when Yale Larry recovered a Tom Barnett bobble on the Pittsburgh 15. Here, Martin's 17-yard field goal put the Lions ahead 10-3 and set the stage for the Steelers' only sustained march of the day. It came when Lane started throwing short passes and his teammates gobbled up the 75. I guess this is supposed to be yards, not years. The teammates gobbled up the 75 years in 6 plays. The key gainer was a second down pass from Lane to Krutko, who, bowling like a runaway tractor, moved 37 yards to the Detroit 20. There on first down, Lane hit Tracy in the end zone with a ridiculously easy scoring toss. The futility of the entire situation was emphasized on the last 2 plays of the game when the rivals attempted a pair of last-ditch back-to-back field goals. Rookie Don Sutherland's 45-yard attempt for the Steelers was blocked, and on the next play, Martin was short and wide with a 57-yard attempt. A try that had been good would have been the longest field goal ever kicked in a pro game. Wow. Let's see here. Here we have the there we go. We got some stats here. Let me see. Steelers had 2 first downs by rushing. The Lions had 10. Yeah. Steelers at 66 yards, 189 total yards. I mean, just, compared to 314 by the Lions. So both these teams are really up for this game. But, I mean, the Lions, one of those games coulda, shoulda, woulda. But let's see. passes intercepted by. Each team had 3 passes intercepted. The Lions have had a lot of passes intercepted all year long. Rushing. You see, the Steelers ran 25 times for 66 yards. They had a long of 12. So if you take that one out, they ran 24 times for 54 yards, average like 2 yards a carry. At least here to see the Lions ran 40 times for 183 yards. Passing lane. Yeah, you see, they only completed 8 passes out of 20 for 160 yards. They're the lineups. Defensive halfback Jack Butler of the Steelers received a new station wagon before yesterday's game between the Steelers and the Lions. Car was given to Butler as the highlight of a second annual Steeler Day program promoted by Mike Cassidy of Green Tree, a rabid fan. In addition to the car, Butler received a matched set of luggage, a life-size blow-up of one of his photographs, and a watch from his Steeler teammates at a banquet in a new arena last night. Ernie Stauner, who received the new car as the recipient of the first award last year, made the presentation to Butler. Wow. There was no indication of a feud as Steeler coach Buddy Parker and Detroit coach George Wilson met at midfield preceding yesterday's game. The rival coaches spoke for several minutes before the game. After the game, Parker entered the Lions dressing room to congratulate several of the players. As Parker entered, Wilson left, explaining that he had already talked with the Steeler coach earlier in the day. So, all right, I got a few more here to read, so let me get going. Then we got the November 9th, 1959 of the Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph. Pittsburgh Sun-Telegraph, what do we got here? All right, here we go. Once again, Jack Butler honored by the Steeler fans. Once again, refresh the page. Here we go. Only wins count, says Parker. There's Bobby Lane right there. No face mask. I don't think he wore, I'm not sure if he didn't wear thigh pads. He didn't wear hip pads, I don't think. He wore the basic, the bare necessities, really. Rushes on. Steeler quarterback Bobby Lane desperately tries to elude crashing Detroit linebacker Bob Long while attempting to spot a receiver in the second quarter. Steelers game with the Lions. Poor passer protection found Bobby doing a dance frequently. Poor blocking bottles Lane. Some football coaches are individualists by trait. Others strictly are conformists. Buddy Parker and George Wilson, respective coaches of the Steelers and the Detroit Lions, who played to a tie at Forbes Field yesterday, must be considered members of the former set. Parker, after the game, was not at all pleased with the deadlock and expressed himself thusly. What good is a tie? You have to win in order to go places. Wilson took a more philosophical stance, saying, it's better than a loss. Parker was a little on the disgusted side with his club's weak efforts in the first half of the game, commenting caustically on the lack of blocking by the offensive line and the shoddy tackling of the defense. No wonder Bobby Lane couldn't pass in the first half, said Parker. There was no blocking for him. In the second half, it improved, and Bobby was able to connect on a few and finally pitch for a touchdown. In the first half, the Steelers were terrible. The defensive line was trapped time and time again as the Lions went 73 yards in 8 plays with the opening kickoff for a touchdown. And offensively, the local pros were equally as bad, being able to gain only 3 first downs, 1 rushing, 1 passing, 1 via penalty, while losing 43 yards trying to pass during that time. Wow. In fact, it was midway in the second period before the Steelers were able to get the linesmen their first workout. Wow. They were in Lion territory only twice prior to the intermission, getting to the 43 and 40 on pass interceptions by right safety Jack Butler. However, the Steelers played a lot better in the second half, especially the final period, when it looked as if they might pull it out after trailing 7-3. Quarterback Tobin Rote scored the TD for the Lions, sneaking over for the final yard in the opening period drive, but tackle Jerry Perry booted away 2 chances to add to the score when he missed field goal attempts from the 19 and 27-yard lines in the second quarter. Lane, who had a miserable time trying to get off a pass in the first 2 periods because of heavy rush from the Lions, managed the Steelers' first points in the third period, kicking a field goal from the 29 after passing the club from its own 14. After linebacker Jim Martin had a field goal try from the 22 block by tackle Byron Beams, who was hurt on the play. He towed one from the 17 to give the Lions a 10-3 edge with about 7 minutes left in the game. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about that block in a little bit here. Here we go. Beams, Beatty suffer injuries. Tackled Byron Beams, who blocked Jim Martin's field goal try in the fourth period of the Steelers' tie with the Lions yesterday at Forbes Field, is in Mercy Hospital with a dislocated shoulder. Beams suffered the injury after batting down the ball. He claims he was slammed from behind by a Lion. He will be lost for several weeks. Center Ed Beatty was another Steeler hurt. He suffered a cut over an eye, which required 4 stitches to close. Steeler and Jack McLaren on the injury reserve list will undergo an operation by team surgeon Dr. John R. Miller at Mercy Hospital this week for the removal of torn knee cartilage. Wow. Then Lane started to find the range, hitting halfback Ray Matthews and Darrell Brewster and fullback Larry Krutko with passes to move from his 25 down to the line 20. Next off, Bobby held the ball long enough for Tom Tracy to get behind middle guard Joe Schmidt in the end zone before letting fly the touchdown heave. Lane, with about a minute and a half left, was pitching away again, finding Brewster and Jimmy Orr with passes to hurry play from the 25 to the Detroit 38. However, he overshot Matthews, who was standing on the 15 and was forced to try for a 45-yard field goal. The attempt was blocked by Bill Glass, who also recovered from the lines at midfield. There were only 6 seconds remaining when Martin tried for a field goal, for a league field goal record, kicking from 57 yards out. His foot was strong enough, but the ball sailed off to the left of the uprights. The tie moved the Steelers 2-4-1 out of the Eastern Division cellar, while the Lions remained sole owners of the whole of the western end of the league at 1-5-1. Parker, who seems to have luck picking up young players, scored again with Don Sutherland. He signed the rookie from Ohio State last Thursday after he was dropped by the Giants. Sutherland did the kicking off, ran back kickoffs, and played defensive left safety, and he did all things well. The Steelers and the Lions deserved each other in a 10-10 tied Forbes Field yesterday. For more than 50 minutes, the game was a fat nothing, and only at the finish were the fans repaid for sitting through the chilling cold that long waited for something to happen. Then the Lions kicked their first field goal in 4 tries. Bobby Lane finally got hot and passed his way 75 yards in 6 plays to a touchdown, and each team missed a frantic attempt for a field goal in the last 11 seconds. The Steelers from the 48 and the Lions from the 57. Steelers somehow managed to get through the first half with the score only being 7-0 against them, while gaining only 19 yards against 263 by the Lions. And with fans roundly booing Lane, who was being smeared time after time as he ate the ball looking for a receiver of a long pass, Bobby was more his old self at the finish. But it was a wonder he didn't crack completely when the fans yelling to put Dawson in. Yeah, I mean, imagine that. I mean, the Steelers actually had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks on their roster. They had Len Dawson and Bobby Lane. Coach Buddy Parker had his own troubles with the Detroit Bleacher Club delegation behind the bench, playing and singing, "Goodbye, Parker, you're going to leave us now," and chanting, "Parker's a quitter." Both references being to the coach's departure from the Lions to come to Pittsburgh. George Wilson, coach of the Lions, also had his hecklers. A sign posted at the end of the right field stands reading, "Detroit fans still say trade Wilson." It was that sort of day and game, one that even had a small dog wander upon the field while the ball was in play, and a fan coming down out of the stands to join the Steelers in a huddle under the home plate goalpost from where he left on the police escort. So, a fan. Dog wander on the field, and a fan coming down out of the stands to join the Steelers in the huddle. Could you imagine that nowadays? Lions have won only one game of 7, and the Steelers 2, and now they have this hard-won tie to share between them. Wow. All right, now we got, what do we got? We got the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, November 9th, 1959. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. What do they got to say here? All right, here we go. Tobin wrote, shows way as Lions click for a touchdown. And let's refresh. Have a bid. All right. It was the end of a 73-yard drive. Tobin crashing in right here. J.C. Nabb's late touchdown pass. All-Pro Bobby Lane never gave up yesterday at Forbes Field. He finally pitched the favorite Pittsburgh Steelers from behind in the final minutes of play to tie his former teammates to the Lions 10-10. Only 24,614 fans, smallest crowd here to date. Wow, that's hard to believe. Wow, I mean, a lot of it's got to do, it's you can believe it, but you can't, because it's like between the feud. I mean, the Detroit coach now is the quit and went to Pittsburgh. Bobby Lane got traded to Pittsburgh and from Detroit, so you figure there's that feud going on there. But both these teams are horrible coming into this game, so I guess you can kind of say why there was only 24,000 there. But let's say, watch the rally of Rooney U on an ideal football afternoon. They stayed around to the final whistle as both sides failed on long field goal tries in the last 11 seconds. The needed TD went to Tom the Bomb Tracy, another ex-Detroiter, who accepted a 20-yard aerial from Bobby in the end zone at 11:35 gone. And that's true, too. Tom Tracy was with the Lions back in, especially in 57, their championship season. He was with them. Lane shot the tying extra point through the uprights, too, just as he had booted a 29-yard fielder in the third quarter. So he was involved in all home scores. And there goes the revenge. Revenge for none, it says. The drawer made the local record 2-4-1 for the season, while the former world champions are now 1-5-1. The Lions are buried in the western cellar. Pittsburgh now rests in 5th position in the East. The visitors were in front until the final 3.5 minutes. They took over an early TD on quarterback Tobin Roach's 1-yard sneak. 17-yard fielder by Jim Martin came in the 4th stanza to match a third period 3-pointer of the locals. Pittsburgh had a 45-yarder by Don Sutherland blocked with only 11 seconds to go. The Lions missed 4 field goals. Kicked 1. They were 1 out of 5 field goal tries. And you're 1 out of 5 nowadays. Your field goal kicker's gone. Haunting the Lions at the finish were 4 missed field goals. Jerry Perry was wide with 19 and 27-yard tries. Martin had a 21-yarder blocked, while his desperation 57-yard try in the last play of the game was weak. Also tormenting the visitors was the fact that they won the statistics with 16 first downs to 14, 183 yards rushing, only 66. 131 yards passing, 123, and a net 314 yards for the Lions, so only 189 yards overall. Lane probably never put in such a miserable first half, as he is smeared for 52 yards on 6 attempts to pass. So I guess he got sacked 6 times for minus 52 yards in the first half alone. Once in the second quarter, he bit the dust for a 20-yard loss on 3 consecutive tries. While the crowd booed, Bobby bided his time and eventually sent the crowd home cheering. He wound up with 12 completions and 27 tries for 181 yards. Tackle Byron Beams of the Steelers was the one serious casualty. He suffered a dislocated left shoulder in blocking Martin's 21-yard field goal try early in the fourth quarter and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance after the game. Jack Butler, a veteran all-pro defensive halfback of the locals, was presented a station wagon by admirers and responded by intercepting his first 2 enemy passes of the season. Detroit quarterback Earl Morrall, forgotten man in the lame deal, went all but the last few minutes of the second half after Rote was hurt near the finish of the first 30 minutes. He did well, hitting on 5 of 9 for 116 yards. The Lions roared 73 yards on 9 plays to register a TD after receiving the opening kickoff. Big gainer was a 37-yard sprint around his own left end on a reverse by Barr, the Steelers defense being caught completely off guard. An 11-yard aerial from Rote to Dorn and rushes of 9 yards by Petrosani and 8 by Cassidy were other features of the advance. Rote capped it by shooting across from the 1 on a quarterback sneak at 4:33, and Perry's conversion made it 7-0. See what we got here. All right, let's see. We got. I got the Detroit Free Press. I got 2 pages from there. So let's read the November 9th, 1959 of the Detroit Free Press. See what they got to say here. All right, Detroit Free Press. Here we go. All right. It's Rote and Company 10. Let's refresh. Let's refresh all the pages, every page. Let's say, okay. Lane and Company 10 to 10. So who's the best quarterback now, Lions fans? That's not again. Here we go. Here's Tobin Rote sneaking over. Sneaks over the goal from the 1 for Lions' only touchdown Sunday. Bobby Lane continues to cast a long shadow over the Lions. Mauled by his ex-buddies frequently in distress, the blonde Texan dramatically pitched the Pittsburgh Steelers into a 10-10 tie with the Lions before 24,614 in Forbes Field. This was the Grudge Bowl game, a time to settle some old scores, a game in which ex-Lions Lane and Buddy Parker, current Lions, Tobin Rote and George Wilson would show their worth. Lane, booed loudly by his followers, came through with the big pitch in the final 3 minutes and 25 seconds to give the Steelers a half victory they hardly deserved. He pitched a 20-yard pass to Tom Tracy, another ex-Lion with memories, and the sweet vengeance the Lions had wanted so badly was gone. Lane also booted a 29-yard field goal. These 2 scoring moves matched a 1-yard touchdown smash by Rote in the opening minutes and a 17-yard field goal by Jim Martin midway in the 4th. This was a typical Lane to steal a victory from the Lions, but the Lions helped him. Lane never should have the Steelers within striking distance. Seldom have the Lions been so wasteful as they were in this game. 7 times they were within the Pittsburgh 40. Only twice did they score. Wow. Jeez. 3 interceptions in the second period damaged them just when it seemed they were ready to put Lane and his new buddies out to rout. 3 field goals, any one of which would have meant victory, were muffed. A 4th and 57-yarder by Jim Martin on the game's last play echoed the Lions' futility. With Terry Bars performing in his new role as a pass receiver, the Lions completely outshined the Steelers in every department of play. Yet they had only a narrow 7-0 lead entering the second half, and Lane quickly narrowed that. He shot passes to Tracy and Darrell Brewster opening the third period and set himself up for a 29-yard field goal, cutting Detroit's lead to 7-3. Lions had a chance later in the period to go further ahead when Barr made a brilliant ankle catch of a pass from Earl Morrall on the Steeler 29. Morrall was in there then because Rote had damaged his right knee at the line of the second period. At the end of the second period, Lions carried to the 13, but Martin's field goal kick was blocked. Finally, midway in the period, after Yell Larry had recovered a fumble by Tom Barnett at the Steelers 16, Martin came through with his field goal, which eventually prevented a Detroit defeat. It was on the kickoff following the field goal with time running out that Lane got the Steelers moving. He pitched toward the sideline as he used to do with Lions hitting Ray Matthews and Brewster, then Larry Krutko. Finally, from the 20, he found the bulky Tracy in the end zone and shot him a perfect pass for the tie. Quarterbacks were the key to this game. Lane had his weak moments, plenty of them. On-rushing lineman smashed him for 58 yards in losses. He completed only 12 of 27 throws. Rote had great difficulty, too. He had 3 interceptions in the second period when the Lions might well have scored a half dozen times. Wow. Together with Morrill, Lions hit only 8 of 20 passes. The first half was so one-sided that the Lions actually had a 193-19 advantage in total yardage. Wow. It was their game, yet they had to share it with the old friend. Detroit dominated the first half so thoroughly that only once did Lane and the Steelers cross midfield. In contrast, the Lions continually were threatening to make a runway of the game, but Rhodes' erratic throwing and poor field goal kicking by Jerry Perry kept them from building their 7-0 lead to something more comfortable. Rhodes had 3 passes intercepted in the second period before he was hurt. Lane was victimized even worse. He lost 2 passes on interceptions, and Bill Glass, Darius McCord, and Alex Karras dropped him for 43 yards and losses. Seldom has Lane been so distressed. Beyond the opportunities lost on Rhodes' interceptions, Perry twice missed field goals from easy ranks, 19 and 28 yards. Lions opened up powerfully, presenting their new backfield alignment with Hopalong Cassidy and Nick Petrosani at the running post and Terry Barr as the flanker. On the third play of the game, Barr came wide on a reverse to the left, took the ball from Rhodes behind a waiting bevy of blockers, raced 37 yards to the Steelers' 37. Cassidy and Petrosani smashed powerfully through the line. Rhodes shot a pass to Jim Doran, and Cassidy hammered again for a 10-yard burst, which set the Lions on the Steeler 1. Rhodes dived in for the score, and the Lions led 7-0 after less than 5 minutes. Frustration from then on until the half was almost comical. It brought jeers from the lane from the Steeler fans and groans from the several hundred Lion followers in the bleachers. Early in the second period, the Lions sat on the Pittsburgh 22. Rhodes threw into the hands of Dean Derby. The next time they had the ball, they pushed to the Steeler 12, and Perry muffed his first field goal. Again, the Lions came back, and Gary Lowe intercepted a Lane pass, but then Rhodes threw into the hands of Jack Butler. Lane at this juncture met his greatest distress. On 3 successive plays, he was thrown for a total of 21 yards and losses. Given the ball again, Rhodes threw an interception to Butler again at the Detroit 40. The Steelers without a first down until midway in the second period, then reached the Detroit 28. But here, Lane was rushed again, and Jim Martin intercepted to kill the lone Steeler threat. As time ran out in the first half, Rhodes swung to his left on a sweep, gaining 13 yards and was thrown out of bounds. He hurt his knee on the play and left the game. Earl Morrill came in then in 2 plays, one on a screen pass to Petrosani, the other a 31-yard pass to Barr, set the Lions up at the Steelers' 12. With 19 seconds left, Perry was rushed in for a field goal try. Again, he was wide of the mark. Wow. And the Lions were left with small comfort of the 7-0 lead to tide them over to the second half. So poor field goal kicking. Very, very poor. So I got one more here. All right, I got that. One more. And it's something I wanted to show. All right, where are we at here? Window. There we go. All right. The Detroit News, November 9th, 1959 edition of the Detroit News. Picture there, making Lane feel old. Alex Karras, 71, Bill Glass, Maul, Bobby Lane. There's Glass, there's Karras, there's Bobby Lane. One picture, you got at least 2 Hall of Famers in there. Right here. 1, 2. Everyone dissatisfied. Here's the 2 coaches meeting. Wilson and the Lions' Buddy Parker of the Steelers, who outwardly friendly both before and after yesterday's game. But, you know, this is when coaches used to wear hats like this, right, and jackets like this and ties. Yeah. It was a flop and a fizzle, that a long-awaited grudge game between George Wilson and Tobin Road on one side and Buddy Parker and Bobby Lane on the other. There were 10,000 empty seats yesterday at Forbes Field. Wow. Instead of a frenzy, the day was filled with frustration for both teams. That's one game we shouldn't have lost, grumbled Coach Wilson of the Lions. You didn't lose. It was a tie. Someone corrected him. Oh, yeah, a tie, said Wilson. Parker and Lane were long faces in Pittsburgh dressing room. Lane had taken a beating from the enterprising Detroit defensive line that had tossed him for 58 yards and losses on pass plays. I feel like an old man, complained a 32-year-old Lane. My knee is really sore, said the 31-year-old Rote. Rote left the game with a damaged right knee just before the half. Played briefly in the fourth quarter and presumably will yield the number one quarterback job next Sunday, Jerome Wall. All this game did for us, murmured Parker, was put us in a little near the Billy Cannon. So, who's the LSU halfback whom the Steelers hope to land as their number one draft choice. Mainly, the game pointed out more clearly than ever that this is one of the most inept teams on offense that Detroit has known. The Lions scored one touchdown yesterday and made one touchdown the Sunday before at San Francisco. For 7 games, the output is a scant 11 touchdowns. Many high schools do better. Wow. Just read this one here. What we got here? Right spot. Terry Barr makes an exceptional catch of a Earl pass for a 45-yard gain in the third quarter. The linebacker switched from defense to offense, caught 2 passes. The other one gained 31 yards. In a change of pace, George Wilson is giving the Detroit Lions an extra day off. The next practice is Wednesday at Briggs Stadium. Last week, Wilson canceled the Monday off after defeat. Oh, yeah, he was last week when he got blown out. Usually you have off on Monday. No, he had him practicing Monday. An extra day off for a tie, mused equipment man Friday, Macklin. If we win next Sunday, we might get the whole week off. William Clay Ford, one of the Detroit directors, visited Bobby Lane in the Pittsburgh dressing room. Hey there, big day, said Lane. How's Henry Ford? Tell him hello. A tie is no good in football. It's the worst thing, except for getting beat. Lane hinted he might hang up his cleats. I won't know for sure until the season is over, he said. Steve Junker is signed to the injured reserve list to make room for defensive back Dick LeBeau goes to University Hospital, Ann Arbor, for another look at his knee tomorrow. There may be further surgery. Yeah, man, you get surgery back then on your knee. Good luck and God bless you. But this is the block kick that hurt the most, as George Wilson sees it. We made 1 field goal and 5 attempts against the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday. That's bad when 3 of the missed kicks were inside the 30-yard line. You got a kicker that misses within the 30-yard line nowadays. Yeah, you can forget about it, man. He's gone. The play that kept us from winning yesterday was a blocked field goal against Jim Martin. Jim was at the 21-yard line with Earl Morrall holding. If the Steelers had been blocked at the scrimmage line, everything would have been all right. There wouldn't have been time for anybody to slip around on the outside to block the ball. We missed a block on Mike Henry, the linebacker of the Steelers, who came through the middle and caught Martin's kick in his chest. Earlier, Jerry Perry had missed field goals of 19 and 26 yards. We gave Martin a chance at the next one. Martin's kicks don't go as high as Perry's. He's more of a line drive kicker. But with good blocking, I'm sure Jim would have made it. The block kick came in the fourth quarter when we were leading 7-3. Later, Martin kicked a 16-yarder. The blocking was fine on that one. Martin's 57-yarder on the last play of the game was just a desperation deal. Things are going bad when you mess up such a simple thing as a field goal. So I guess, right, got Petrosani and Webb. These guys, covering the outside here and the blocking up the middle there. So I don't know. He covered him. I don't know what happened there. But somehow Henry, guy burst up the middle, came through and blocked the kick, which wound up, one of many reasons. But, when you're a bad team, bad things happen to bad teams. I mean, you could have, when the yardage total, the first down, the time of possession, you can have run for 5 yards a carry. But, sometimes it's not always coaching. Sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's a missed block. Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it's that. And obviously, one thing is for sure is that the Lions found many ways to lose football games this year. I mean, yeah, they had a bunch of, even when, usually a lot of their problems, the Lions was a lack of offense. Well, it was kind of the same thing, but it wasn't from not being able to move the ball. They had the passing yards. They ran the ball really well. In this game, they wound up missing all those field goals. A lot of other times that they had, even when they had good rushing, they had bad passing. So it was just like almost like every game, when they would either lose or tie, they found a way to lose. And, that's the way it is. Bad teams find ways to lose or maybe tie a game in which they should have won, right? But for the Pittsburgh Steelers, this was the beginning, right, of a little bit of a turnaround. They started the season off really, really bad. They were in last place, and even with this tie, they were still had a horrible record. But they would wind up winning, 4 out of their last 6 games, and they would actually wind up with a 6-5-1 record. It was the third place, but just the fact that what they did in the final half of the season, and that they came through with the winning record was huge, especially for a team like the Pittsburgh, who has been around since 1933. This is 1959, and they only had one playoff game, and it wasn't even a championship game. So for them to start off really bad and finish at 6-5-1, it's a successful season for them. So that's the way it was on this day, the Bobby Lane Grudge Bowl. November 8th, 1959, as the Detroit Lions went to Forbes Field to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers in pro football's first 50 years. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.